The day I discovered my daughter had drained my retirement account, I stood in the kitchen of the colonial home I'd spent 35 years paying off, holding a bank statement that showed a balance of exactly $43.17. $327,000. Gone. My hands trembled as I traced the transfer history. 27 withdrawals over 8 months, all authorized with my information. The room spun as reality crashed down on me. Rebecca, my only daughter, the child I'd sacrificed everything for, had systematically stolen my future while telling me she was helping manage my finances. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. That was the moment something hardened inside me. I folded the statement with deliberate precision and slipped it into my pocket. The house Rebecca had grown up in, the home she'd been reminding me was too big for one person and how she couldn't wait to raise her children here someday. Well, she'd learn exactly what happens when you mistake maternal love for weakness. I never planned to be a single mother. Richard and I had built what I thought was a perfect life together. A charming home in Oakridge with the wraparound porch I'd always dreamed of, promising careers, and plans for at least 3 children. Rebecca came along right on schedule, a beautiful baby girl with her father's dark curls and dimpled smile. I was 31, working as a nurse practitioner at the regional medical center, and Richard had just made partner at his architectural firm. When Rebecca was 4, Richard developed a persistent cough. 6 months later, I was a widow, watching them lower my husband's casket into frozen ground, holding our daughter's mittened hand. Lung cancer, non-smoker, 38 years old. The statistical improbability of it all seemed like some cosmic joke. The life insurance barely covered the funeral expenses and remaining medical bills. I was suddenly the sole provider for a heartbroken child and a mortgage that stretched beyond my single income. The logical choice would have been selling the house, moving somewhere less expensive, starting fresh. But this home held Richard's fingerprints, the back deck he'd built, himself, the height markings on the kitchen doorframe, the study where he'd sketched his designs. More importantly, it was the only home Rebecca had known. "Mommy, are we going to move away?" she'd asked one night, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. Her eyes, so much like her father's, were wide with fear of more loss. "No, sweetheart," I promised. "This is our home. We're staying right here." That promise shaped the next 3 decades of my life. I picked up extra shifts at the hospital, working nights and weekends. When that wasn't enough, I added home health visits on my days off. Sleep became a luxury. I lived on coffee and determination. The mortgage payment always came first, then Rebecca's needs, then, if anything remained, my own. Rebecca was an exceptional child, bright, creative, and deeply sensitive. She felt her father's absence like a physical wound, developing anxieties that required therapy I could barely afford. But I made it work. When she showed musical talent, I found a way to pay for piano lessons. When she needed braces, I took a temporary weekend position at a nursing home. When she was accepted to Westlake Academy, a prestigious private high school, I remortgaged the house to cover the tuition. "You're working too hard, Mom," she'd sometimes say, watching me massage my swollen feet after an 18-hour shift. "I'm fine, honey. This is what mothers do," I'd reply, hiding my exhaustion behind a smile. By the time Rebecca left for Glenwood University, I'd paid off the second mortgage and was finally making headway on retirement savings. At 49, I was 2 decades behind where financial planners said I should be, but I was catching up, contributing the maximum to my 401k and adding to a separate retirement account monthly. Rebecca graduated with honors in business administration, and I felt a profound sense of accomplishment. All those sleepless nights and missed vacations had been worth it. My daughter would have the opportunities I'd sacrificed. When Rebecca announced she was engaged to Jason, a financial advisor she'd met during her senior year. I was thrilled. He came from a wealthy family, was clearly ambitious, and seemed to adore my daughter. I spent $22,000 on their wedding, draining my emergency fund but telling myself it was an investment in her happiness. The newlyweds settled in Oakridge, just 20 minutes from my home, and for a while, everything seemed perfect. 3 years. Later, their perfect facade began to crack. Rebecca called one evening, her voice tight with controlled tears. "Mom, I need to talk to you about something important." Over coffee at my kitchen table, she confessed that Jason's financial advisory firm was struggling. They'd overextended on their mortgage for a house in the right neighborhood. Credit. Card debt had spiraled as they tried to maintain appearances among his affluent colleagues. "We're drowning, Mom," she whispered. "Jason's so stressed he can barely sleep. If the firm fails, we'll lose everything." My heart ached for her. "What can I do, sweetheart?" She hesitated, then, "We need an investment to keep the firm afloat. Until the new clients Jason's been courting come through. Just $60,000. We can pay you back with interest in a year, 2 at most." I had exactly $58,427 in my accessible savings account. It was my safety net, meant to cover major home repairs or medical emergencies. But this was my daughter in crisis. "Of course," I said, writing a check on the spot. "Whatever you need." Rebecca hugged me tightly. "You've always been my guardian, angel, mom. I don't know what I'd do without you." That was the first withdrawal. It wouldn't be the last. 6 months later, Rebecca was pregnant with twins. The same week, Jason's car was totaled in an accident. Insurance wouldn't cover a replacement because he'd opted for minimum coverage to reduce their monthly expenses. They needed another $15,000. A year after that, their roof developed a significant leak during a harsh winter storm. $22,000. When the twins were born prematurely, Rebecca took unpaid leave from her marketing position. They needed help with mortgage payments. $30,000 over 6 months. Each time, the story was the same. Just until things stabilized, just until Jason's business turned the corner, just until Rebecca could return to work. And each time, I dipped further into my savings, then my retirement funds, paying the early withdrawal penalties without complaint. How could I not? This was my daughter, my grandchildren. Family comes first. That's what I'd always believed. By the time the twins turned 3, I was 62. The extra shifts I'd once managed with determination and caffeine now left me physically depleted. My knees ached constantly from decades of hospital rounds. My blood pressure was concerning my doctor. It was time to consider retirement, to finally prioritize my own health. I sat down with my financial statements, calculating what remained of my retirement savings and what I could expect from Social Security. The numbers were sobering. If I continued working part-time for another 5 years and lived very frugally, I might have enough to sustain a modest retirement. I'd never travel as I'd dreamed of doing with Richard. The garden room addition I'd planned would remain just a sketch in a notebook. But I could manage. That weekend, Rebecca and Jason brought the twins for their usual Sunday dinner. As the children played in the backyard, I broached the subject. "I've been thinking about cutting back my hours." "At the hospital," I said carefully. "My body's telling me it's time." Rebecca paused, fork halfway to her mouth. "Really? But you always said you wanted to work until at least 65? "That was the plan. But the arthritis in my knees is getting worse. Dr. Winters says if I don't reduce the strain now, I could be looking at replacement surgery within a few years." Jason cleared his throat. "What about your finances? Healthcare is expensive these days." "I've been running the numbers," I admitted. "It'll be tight, but with my remaining retirement funds and Social Security, I should be okay if I'm careful." Rebecca and Jason exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. "That's great, Mom. Rebecca said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. You deserve to take it easier. Though this house is really too big for just one person. All these stairs can't be good for your knees either. I've thought about that, I acknowledged. But this is home. I'm not ready to leave yet. Well, when you are, Rebecca continued, voice light, Jason and I would love to raise the twins here. All this space, the beautiful yard, it would be perfect for them. Plus, Jason added, it would be a shame to sell to strangers after all these years. Keeping it in the family makes sense. I nodded non-committally, uncomfortable with their presumption but unwilling to create tension. We'll see when the time comes. For now, I'm just focused on transitioning to part-time. After they left, I sat on the porch swing, watching fireflies rise from the lawn. Richard and I had spent countless evenings here, planning our future, dreaming of grandchildren playing in this very yard. Now that future had arrived, but without him, and with a disquieting undercurrent I couldn't quite name. The next morning, I called my bank to begin the process of consolidating my remaining retirement accounts in preparation for the reduced income ahead. That's when the representative's concerned voice changed everything. Ms. Sullivan, are you aware of the recent withdrawals from your retirement account? Withdrawals? No, I haven't made any withdrawals recently. There was a pause. According to our records, there have been multiple withdrawals over the past 8 months, totaling just over $300,000. The room tilted. That's impossible. I never authorized those. The transactions were processed with your correct authorization codes and security questions, ma'am. The most recent was 3 days ago for $45,000. 3 days ago, the day before our Sunday dinner. The day before Rebecca suggested I should consider giving them my house. I need all the documentation you have on these withdrawals, I said, my voice strangely calm despite the earthquake happening inside me. Every date, amount, and where the money was sent. When the bank statements arrived by secure email an hour later, the truth was undeniable. Every withdrawal had been transferred to an account I recognized, the joint business account Rebecca had asked me to add funds to that first time, when she'd written down all the details for my reference. My own daughter had systematically drained my retirement savings without my knowledge or consent. While I worked extra shifts despite my failing knees, while I pinched pennies and deferred my own dreams, she and Jason had been stealing my future. As the reality sank in, something shifted within me. The maternal instinct to protect, to forgive, to sacrifice. It didn't disappear, but it was joined by something else. Something with edges. A determination to protect myself with the same fierce devotion I'd always directed toward my daughter. I picked up the phone and called not Rebecca, but someone else entirely. James Whitaker, a real estate attorney who'd been a patient of mine years ago when he was battling lymphoma. I'd spent countless hours at his bedside during his darkest days, and he'd always told me to call if I ever needed anything. James, I said when he answered, I think I'm finally going to take you up on that offer. Part 2. The Betrayal Unveiled. The next Sunday dinner arrived with painful predictability. Rebecca, Jason, and the twins appeared on my doorstep at precisely 4 o'clock, the children clutching crayon drawings and Jason carrying his usual bottle of mid-priced wine that I suspected was meant to impress me more than be enjoyed. I'd spent the week in a strange state of calm preparation. After my meeting with James, I'd contacted the bank's fraud department, my financial advisor, and finally, Detective Lorraine Harper at the Oakridge Police Department. With each conversation, I felt less like a victim and more like a woman reclaiming her power. Grandma! The twins, Sophia and Lucas, wrapped their arms around my legs. I bent to hug them, my love for these innocent children untarnished by their parents' betrayal. Something smells amazing, Jason commented, sniffing appreciatively as he stepped into the foyer. You've outdone yourself again, Eleanor. I smiled, thinly. Just an old family recipe, nothing special. Rebecca kissed my cheek. You look tired, Mom. Are those extra shifts still wearing you down? Actually, I've made some decisions about that, I replied, leading them into the dining room where the table was set with my good china, Richard's grandmother's wedding set that we only used for special occasions. Special dinner tonight? Rebecca asked, raising an eyebrow at the formal settings. You could say that. I disappeared into the kitchen to retrieve the roast before returning. I've decided to make some significant life changes. Rebecca's eyes lit up. Oh? Like what? For starters, I've decided to sell the house. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the twins seemed to sense the sudden tension, their little forks pausing midair. Sell the house? Rebecca repeated, her voice pitched higher than normal. But Mom, we've talked about this. There's no need to sell. When you're ready to downsize, Jason and I can move in, keep it in the family. That was the plan, I agreed, cutting into my roast with deliberate precision. But plans change, like retirement plans, for instance. Jason shifted uncomfortably in his chair. What do you mean? I took a sip of water, maintaining eye contact with my son-in-law. I met with my financial advisor this week. Imagine my surprise when I discovered that my retirement accounts have been nearly emptied. Over $300,000 gone in just 8 months. Rebecca's face drained of color. Mom, I can explain. I'm sure you can, Rebecca. You've always been excellent at explanations, like explaining why you needed $60,000 to save Jason's business, or why you needed help with mortgage payments on a house you couldn't afford, or why, 3 days before suggesting I give you this house, you withdrew $45,000 from my retirement account without my knowledge or permission. Jason set down his fork with a clatter. Now wait a minute, Eleanor. This is a misunderstanding. Is it a misunderstanding that you used my personal information to authorize withdrawals I never approved? Is it a misunderstanding that you've stolen my retirement while planning to take my home as well? My voice remained steady, almost conversational. Because Detective Harper at the Fraud Division doesn't think it's a misunderstanding at all. She thinks it's felony theft and identity fraud. Rebecca's composure cracked. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Mom, please. We were desperate. Jason's business had setbacks. Setbacks that apparently required my entire retirement fund to address? I shook my head. I've seen your credit. Card statements, Rebecca. The luxury vacations, the designer clothes, the country club membership. That doesn't look like desperation to me. You went through our financial records? Jason demanded, outrage replacing his earlier discomfort. No, Detective Harper did. With a warrant. I smiled thinly. It turns out that when you commit financial fraud against a senior citizen, law enforcement takes it quite seriously. Rebecca pushed back from the table, trembling. Mom, you can't be serious. You called the police on us? Your own daughter? My own daughter who stole from me? I countered. Yes, I did. We were going to pay you back, Jason interjected, desperation edging his voice. We just needed more time. The market's been volatile. Save the financial? Advisors speak for someone who hasn't seen your personal accounts. I cut him off. You had no intention of paying me back. You were waiting for me to retire, to become dependent on you, so I'd have no choice but to sign over this house. Then, you'd probably move me into some budget-assisted living facility while you raised your children in my home. Rebecca's tears turned to sobs. That's not true. We love you. Love doesn't empty bank accounts without permission, Rebecca. What about the twins? She cried, gesturing to the children who were now wide-eyed and confused by the adults' distress. They're your grandchildren. Would you really see their parents go to jail? It was the lowest blow, using the children as emotional shields. I looked at my grandchildren, my heart breaking for what they would soon learn about their parents. The twins are precisely why I've made the arrangements I have, I said quietly. Detective Harper has agreed to delay filing charges on one condition: full restitution of all stolen funds, plus the legal fees I've incurred, within 30 days. Jason's face hardened. That's impossible. We don't have that kind of liquid capital. Then I suggest you start selling things, I replied. Your vacation home at Lake Geneva would be a good start. Or perhaps those investment properties you purchased last year, with my money, apparently. Rebecca stared at me, shock and betrayal written across her face. How did you know about those? As I said, Detective Harper has been thorough. Jason stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. You won't go through with this. She's bluffing, Rebecca. I met his gaze steadily. The house goes on the market tomorrow, Jason. I've already signed with Westside Realty. The proceeds will help fund my retirement, what's left of it, and I'll be moving to Sandpiper Shores next month. The retirement community? Rebecca looked horrified. Mom, that place is for old people who can't take care of themselves. Actually, it's for people who want security, community, and freedom from home maintenance, I corrected her. They have an excellent wellness center that will help with my arthritis, and the 2-bedroom unit I've reserved has a lovely view of the bay. But what about us? Rebecca whispered. What about family Sunday dinners and the twins growing up? In this house? You should have thought about that before you decided to steal my future, I said, my voice finally betraying a hint of the grief beneath my resolve. Now, I think it's time for you to leave. My attorney will be contacting you tomorrow with the restitution details. Jason grabbed Rebecca's arm. Come on, we're not staying here to be insulted. As they gathered the confused twins and their belongings, Rebecca paused at the front door, her eyes red and pleading. Mom, please. We can work this out. We're family. I thought of all the nights I'd worked double shifts to keep this roof over our heads, of the vacations never taken, of the retirement now in shambles, of the daughter I'd raised to be better than this. Yes, we're family, I agreed, and that's why this hurts so much. But being family doesn't mean I'll let you destroy me. After they left, I sat alone in the sudden silence of my dining room, surrounded by half-eaten food on my best china. For the first time in decades, I allowed myself to cry. Not for the money lost, but for the daughter I thought I knew. Part 3. The Hidden Reserve. What Rebecca and Jason didn't know, couldn't have known, was that I wasn't entirely without resources. The retirement accounts they'd drained represented the bulk of my financial security. Yes, but not all of it. There was one account they hadn't discovered, one secret I'd kept even from my daughter. 3 years after Richard died, when Rebecca was 7, I received a letter from my husband's former college roommate, Michael Chen. Michael had gone on to build a successful tech company while Richard pursued architecture. They'd remained close, with Michael often spending holidays with us when business brought him to our area. I've never forgotten how Richard supported me during our college years, Michael wrote. When my parents cut me off for changing my major from medicine to computer science, it was Richard who shared his meal plan with me, who let me sleep on his dorm room floor until I found work. Without him, I might have had to drop out. Everything I've built since then, I owe in part to his kindness. The letter contained a check for $75,000, an enormous sum for a struggling widow, and instructions to invest it for Rebecca's education. Richard would want his daughter to have every opportunity, Michael explained. I followed his instructions, setting up a college fund for Rebecca. But I also did something else. I took $25,000 of the gift and opened a separate investment account in my name only, with strict instructions that all correspondence be sent to a private P.O. box rather than my home address. It wasn't that I didn't trust my 7-year-old daughter. It was simply that I'd learned the hard way how quickly security could vanish. This would be my ultimate emergency fund, money no one knew existed, not even Rebecca. Over the years, I added to it sparingly, a small portion of each tax refund, occasional small windfalls from birthdays or holiday bonuses. The contributions were modest, but the account grew steadily thanks to Michael's advice on investment choices. He'd check in periodically, offering guidance on market shifts and opportunities. By the time Rebecca and Jason began their systematic theft of my known retirement funds, this shadow account had grown to just over $180,000. Not enough to replace what they'd stolen, but enough to ensure I wouldn't be destitute. Enough to give me options. The morning after the confrontation dinner, I met with Michael at a quiet cafe downtown. Now in his 70s, he remained sharp and perceptive, his eyes widening with shock as I recounted Rebecca's betrayal. "I never would have expected this from her," he said, shaking his head. "Richard would be heartbroken." "I know," I sighed. "That's the worst part. I keep wondering where I went wrong, what I missed in raising her." Michael reached across the table to cover my hand with his. "You didn't go wrong, Eleanor. You were an exceptional mother. Some people just make bad choices when money and status become their priorities. Well, those priorities have cost her dearly," I said. "The detective estimates they've spent nearly half of what they took already. Even if they liquidate their investment properties, they'll still be short. What will you do if they can't make full restitution?" I stared into my coffee cup. "I don't know. I can't bear the thought of my grandchildren visiting their parents in prison. But I also can't let them get away with this." Michael nodded thoughtfully. "I might have a proposition that could help, not for them, but for you." He explained that his company was opening a new wellness division, focusing on healthcare technology designed specifically for seniors. They needed experienced healthcare professionals to consult on product development. The position would be part-time, mostly remote work with occasional travel to our headquarters in Seattle, he explained. The compensation would be substantial, and it comes with comprehensive benefits, including senior housing options near our facilities. "Michael, are you offering me a job out of pity?" He laughed. "Hardly. I'm offering you a job because you're a nurse practitioner with 30 years of experience who knows exactly what older patients need and what current technology lacks. This is a business decision, Eleanor. The compassion is just a bonus." I considered his offer. Working with Michael's company would provide income without the physical strain of hospital work. The benefits would help offset the retirement savings I'd lost. Most importantly, it would give me purpose again. Something beyond being Rebecca's mother or the twins' grandmother. "I'll need time to think about it," I said finally, "and to see how things play out with Rebecca and Jason." "Of course," Michael replied. "The offer stands regardless of what happens with them." As I left the cafe, my phone chimed with a text from my real estate agent. "First showing scheduled for tomorrow. 3 more interested parties requesting appointments. This could move quickly." I smiled, feeling a weight lift slightly. The house that had both sheltered and imprisoned me for 35 years might soon belong to someone else. The thought was simultaneously terrifying and liberating. That evening, Rebecca called, her voice thick with forced contrition. "Mom, we've been talking to some financial advisors. We can give you $50,000 now as a good faith payment, and then set up a repayment plan for the rest." "That's not acceptable, Rebecca." The detective was clear. "Full restitution within 30 days or charges will be filed." "That's impossible," she cried. "We'd have to sell everything." "Yes," I agreed simply. "You would. What about the twins? Would you really make your grandchildren homeless?" "Don't be dramatic, Rebecca. Selling your vacation home and investment properties won't make anyone homeless. You'll still have your primary residence." First, there was a pause. Then a new calculation entered her voice. "Mom, what if we made another arrangement? What if you kept the house and we moved in with you? We could help with maintenance, and you wouldn't have to go to that retirement community. We could be a family again, under one roof. The manipulation was so transparent it almost made me laugh. So I could watch you wait for me to die so you could inherit the house debt-free? No, thank you. That's a horrible thing to say. We love you. Love doesn't steal retirement funds, Rebecca. Love doesn't exploit a parent's generosity until there's nothing left to give. She began to cry again, but the tears that once would have shattered my resolve now hardened it. The house is being shown to potential buyers tomorrow, I told her. I suggest you focus your energy on finding the money you took from me. After hanging up, I walked through the house, touching the familiar walls, the door frames where Richard had measured Rebecca's height each birthday, the banister he'd carved by hand. So many memories lived in these walls. But a house isn't memories. It's wood and stone and glass. The memories would travel with me. In my bedroom closet, behind winter coats and old photo albums, I found the small fireproof box where I kept our most important documents. Inside was Richard's wedding ring, which I'd removed from his finger at the hospital before they took him away. Next to it lay a sealed envelope with Rebecca's name on it, a letter I'd written on her wedding day, intended to be given to her if anything happened to me. I opened it now, reading the words I'd penned with such love and hope 7 years earlier. My dearest Rebecca, if you're reading this, I'm no longer with you. I want you to know that being your mother has been the greatest privilege of my life. Every sacrifice, every long shift, every penny saved, it was all for you, and I would do it all again in a heartbeat. This house that now belongs to you has sheltered 3 generations of love. Your father's spirit lives in its bones, just as yours lives in its heart. Care for it as we cared for you, with unwavering devotion and endless love. Remember that true wealth isn't measured in property or possessions, but in the lives we touch and the love we share. You have been my greatest treasure, my most precious gift, all my love, always, Mom. I folded the letter and placed it back. In the envelope, sealing away the mother I'd been, trusting, self-sacrificing to a fault, blind to the entitlement I'd accidentally nurtured. That woman belonged to the past, along with the dream of a daughter who valued character over comfort. Tomorrow, strangers would walk through these rooms, envisioning their own futures within these walls. And I would begin building something I'd neglected for far too long, a life that belonged to me alone. Part 4, The Reckoning. The house sold in 9 days, a record even in Oakridge's hot market. The buyers, a young physician and her wife, fell in love with the wraparound porch and Richard's hand-carved details. They offered $20,000 above asking price with a 60-day close, which gave me time to sort through 3 decades of accumulated life. Rebecca and Jason, meanwhile, were scrambling. Their Lake Geneva vacation home sold quickly, but for less than they'd hoped in a rushed transaction. Jason had to liquidate 2 of his 4 investment properties at a loss. His parents, wealthy but notoriously frugal, refused to bail them out of their own mess, as Jason bitterly reported to mutual friends who later told me. 3 weeks after our confrontation dinner, they were still over $100,000 short of full restitution. Detective Harper was growing impatient, her sympathetic professionalism gradually hardening into disappointment that justice might be compromised. "I can only extend the deadline so far, Mrs. Sullivan," she explained during one of our weekly check-ins. "If they haven't made full restitution by the 30-day mark, I'll have to file the charges." I nodded, my heart heavy but my resolve intact. I understand. They've made their choices. That evening, as I sorted through photo albums in preparation for my move, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find not Rebecca or Jason, but Carolyn Winters, Rebecca's mother-in-law, a formidable woman I'd met only a handful of times at family events. Her crisp linen pantsuit and perfectly coiffed silver hair presented the image of effortless wealth that had always made me feel slightly inadequate in my department store clothes. "Eleanor," she greeted me with a small, tight smile. "May I come in?" I stepped aside, curious about this unexpected visit. Carolyn had always been cordial, but distant, treating me with the polite disinterest of someone acknowledging the hired help. She settled onto my living room sofa, declining my offer of tea or coffee. "I'll come straight to the point," she said, briskly. "I understand my son and your daughter have created quite a situation." "That's one way to put it," I replied. Carolyn's perfectly manicured nails tapped against her designer handbag. Harold and I were surprised by the extent of their financial difficulties. Jason led us to believe his business was thriving. I almost laughed. Jason seems to have led many people to believe many things. "Yes, well," she cleared her throat. "The fact remains that they are family, our grandchildren's parents. And while Harold and I don't condone their actions, we're also unwilling to see them face criminal charges." "I'm not pressing charges out of vindictiveness, Carolyn. They stole my retirement. That has consequences." She nodded stiffly. "I'm aware, which is why I've come with a proposal." She removed an envelope from her handbag and placed it on the coffee table between us. "This contains a certified check for the remaining balance they owe you, $117,382 to be exact. If you accept it, the matter can be considered resolved, and you can instruct your detective friend to close the case." I stared at the envelope. "You're bailing them out." "I prefer to think of it as protecting our grandchildren from unnecessary trauma," she replied. "The money is a loan, not a gift. Jason and Rebecca will repay us according to terms Harold has outlined. Terms considerably less favorable than any bank would offer, I assure you." I picked up the envelope, feeling its weight. "Why would you do this? You and Harold made it clear you wouldn't help them." Something shifted in Carolyn's carefully composed expression, a flicker of genuine emotion breaking through the social veneer. "Because I was you once, Eleanor." She straightened her already impeccable posture. "Before Harold's success, before the country club memberships and summer homes, we struggled. My parents remortgaged their farm to help us start our first business. When that business began to succeed, we forgot. We became so focused on climbing higher that we neglected to remember who gave us the first rung on the ladder." Her voice softened almost imperceptibly. "My parents died before we could properly repay them, not just financially, but with the respect and gratitude they deserved. It's a debt I can never settle, a regret I'll carry to my grave." I hadn't expected this vulnerability from the perpetually composed Carolyn Winters. It humanized her in a way that made my next decision both easier and more difficult. "I appreciate your offer," I said carefully, "but there's something you should know before I accept it." I explained about Michael's job offer, about the secret investment account, about my plans for a new life beyond this house and the role of family caretaker. "I'm not destitute," I concluded. "I would have managed, even without full restitution." Carolyn studied me with new interest. "Yet, you let them believe their actions had left you financially ruined." "I let them face the consequences of what they thought they were doing," I corrected. "Their intent was to leave me dependent and vulnerable. The fact that they didn't entirely succeed doesn't lessen the betrayal." A small smile played at the corners of Carolyn's lips, not the practiced social smile she typically wore, but something more genuine. "I underestimated you, Eleanor. We all did, it seems." "Most people do," I acknowledged, "including Rebecca." Carolyn tapped the envelope. "My offer stands, regardless of your hidden resources. What Jason and Rebecca did was wrong. They should make it right." I picked up the envelope and nodded. "I agree, and they will, to you. I hope the process teaches them something about integrity and consequences." "As do I," she replied, "though I'm not particularly optimistic." As she rose to leave, Carolyn paused, her expression thoughtful. You know, Eleanor, Harold and I, winter in Scottsdale. Our community has an excellent guest program for extended stays. If you'd ever like a change of scenery from Sandpiper Shores, you'd be welcome. The offer surprised me, an olive branch from the last place I'd expected one. Thank you, Carolyn. I might take you up on that someday. After she left, I called Detective Harper to inform her that full restitution had been made, and I would not be pursuing charges. Her relief was palpable. You're more forgiving than most victims in your situation, she commented. I'm not forgiving them, I clarified. I'm simply choosing a different kind of justice. The next day, I called Rebecca. Our conversations had been tense and minimal since the confrontation dinner, limited to curt text messages about restitution, deadlines, and legal requirements. The detective has confirmed receipt of the full amount, I said when she answered. No charges will be filed. Her exhale was audible. Thank you, Mom. I know you don't believe me, but we truly are sorry. We never meant to get caught, I finished for her. I'm not interested in apologies, Rebecca. Your grandmother Winters made it very clear that the money didn't come from you and Jason selling your assets, but from her and Harold bailing you out. How did you know about that? She sounded genuinely startled. Carolyn visited me yesterday. We had an enlightening conversation about family obligations and personal integrity. Rebecca was quiet for a moment. So what happens now? It was the question I'd been asking myself for weeks. What does happen when the person you've sacrificed everything for betrays you so completely? When the future you've imagined, Sunday, dinners with grandchildren, holidays together, the continuity of family, shatters like glass? Now we go our separate ways, I said simply. The house closes in 5 weeks. I'll be moving to Sandpiper Shores after that. And us? What about the twins? Are they just never going to see their grandmother again? The mention of Sophia and Lucas sent a pang through my heart. They were innocent in all this, these bright-eyed children who shared Richard's dimpled smile. The twins are welcome to visit me once I'm settled, I said carefully. With appropriate supervision. Supervision? You mean you don't trust us to bring them? No, Rebecca, I don't. Trust is earned, and you've depleted yours entirely. Her voice hardened. So that's it? 32 years of being your daughter? Erased because of one mistake? $327,000 spread across 27 unauthorized withdrawals isn't one mistake, I reminded her. It's a calculated campaign of theft against your own mother. Mom, please, she whispered, her voice breaking. We can fix this. We can go to family counseling, rebuild our relationship. Don't throw away everything we've been to each other. For a fleeting moment, I wavered. Beneath the hurt and anger, I still loved my daughter. I still remembered the little girl who'd crawl into my lap after Richard died, both of us seeking comfort in each other's warmth. Was I really prepared to sever that bond completely? Then I remembered the bank statement showing just $43 in my retirement account. I remembered how they'd planned to move me out of my own home. I remembered the calculated deception over months and years. I'm not throwing away anything, Rebecca. I'm acknowledging what's already been lost. My voice remained steady. Goodbye. I hung up before she could respond, before her tears could weaken my resolve. Then I returned to the task of sorting through decades of accumulated life, deciding what to keep and what to release. The next 5 weeks passed in a blur of activity. I donated furniture to a women's shelter, gave Richard's architectural books to a local college program, and sorted through countless boxes of mementos. Michael helped arrange for movers and personally drove me to preview my new apartment at Sandpiper Shores. The retirement community surprised me with its vibrancy. Far from the depressing institutional setting Rebecca had implied, it was a modern complex with spacious apartments, beautiful grounds, and residents who seemed genuinely engaged with life. My two-bedroom unit overlooked a small bay where sailboats drifted on clear days. The walls were freshly painted in soft coastal blue, ready to receive whatever new life I chose to create. "It's lovely," I told the leasing manager. "When can I move in?" "We can have everything ready 2 days after your house closing," she assured me. "Will you need any help setting up?" I glanced at Michael, who had appointed himself my unofficial moving coordinator. "I think I'm covered, thank you." On the drive back, Michael cleared his throat. "Have you heard from Rebecca lately?" "Not since our last phone call," I replied, watching the familiar neighborhoods of Oakridge slide past the car window. Though I've received several text messages from Jason's mother, she's been surprisingly supportive. "Guilt is a powerful motivator," Michael observed. "She probably sees in you what could have happened to her if her circumstances had been different." I considered this. Maybe. Or maybe she just recognizes another grandmother who loves her grandchildren, despite everything else. The day before closing, I made one final walk through the house that had been my home for 35 years. Each room held echoes of the life we'd built. Richard's laugh in the kitchen where he'd attempt elaborate recipes with more enthusiasm than skill. Rebecca's first steps across the living room floor. Countless quiet evenings on the porch swing, watching seasons change. Through decades. In Rebecca's old bedroom, I discovered a shoebox pushed to the back of the closet shelf, overlooked during her many retrievals of childhood belongings over the years. Inside were notes passed in high school, dried corsages from dances, and beneath, those mementos, a handmade Mother's Day card from when she was 9. The crayon drawing showed 2 stick figures, one tall, one small, holding hands beside a house with a wraparound porch. Inside, in careful childish printing, "To the best mom ever. I promise to take care of you when you get old, just like you take care of me. Love, Rebecca." I traced the faded words with my fingertip, remembering the little girl who had made this promise with such earnest sincerity. Where had that child gone? At what point had gratitude transformed into entitlement, love into calculation? Perhaps the seeds had been planted in my own excessive sacrifices, in the unspoken message that my needs always came last. Perhaps in trying to give Rebecca everything, I'd failed to teach her the value of anything. I placed the card back in the box and returned it to the shelf. Let the new owners find it someday, this artifact of broken promises. I had carried enough weighty memories already. The house closing was straightforward. I signed the documents, accepted the cashier's check that represented the equity I'd built over 3 decades, and handed over the keys to the excited young couple who would create their own history within those walls. "We'll take good care of it," the physician promised, clearly noting my emotional struggle to maintain composure. "I hope you'll be as happy there as we were," I replied, meaning it despite everything. The house deserved joy within its walls again. 2 days later, I moved into Sandpiper Shores. The transition was both easier and harder than I'd anticipated. Physically, the downsizing was liberating. Less space meant less maintenance, less cleaning, less responsibility. Emotionally, it meant acknowledging that the family life I'd built existed now only in memory. I arranged the few pieces of furniture I'd kept: Richard's reading chair, my grandmother's side table, the small escritoire where I'd paid bills for decades, and hung family photos on the walls. Not many, just enough to acknowledge the past without being consumed by it. Rebecca and the twins were there, in a portrait taken before the betrayal. Richard, too, his smile forever frozen in time. These were parts of my story, even the painful chapters. A week after moving in, I began my consulting work with Michael's company. The position challenged me intellectually while drawing on my years of nursing experience. For the first time in decades, I was valued for my professional expertise, rather than my capacity for self-sacrifice. The steady income, combined with my Social Security benefits and the secret investment account, provided a comfortable, if modest, lifestyle. Life settled into a new rhythm. Mornings were for work, video conferences, document reviews, occasional in-person meetings. Afternoons often found me in the community garden or walking along the shoreline path. Evenings brought dinner, with new friends in the communal dining room or quiet meals on my small balcony, watching the sunset paint the bay in watercolor hues. I was healing, adapting, discovering corners of myself long neglected during years of caretaking. Yet beneath the surface tranquility, a persistent undercurrent of grief remained, not just for the money stolen, but for the daughter I'd lost, the grandchildren now distant, the future I'd envisioned that would never come to pass. 6 weeks after moving to Sandpiper Shores, I received an unexpected visitor. I was returning from my morning walk when I spotted Carolyn Winters sitting on a bench near the entrance to my building. "Eleanor," she called, rising as I approached. "I hope you don't mind the unannounced visit. I was in the area for a charity board meeting." I gestured toward the cafe at the community center. "Would you like some coffee? They make a decent cappuccino." Over coffee, Carolyn updated me on family matters with clinical precision. "Rebecca and Jason have put their house on the market," she reported. "They're downsizing to something more reasonable, per Harold's conditions for the loan repayment." "How are they taking that?" I couldn't help asking. A small, satisfied smile curved Carolyn's lips. "About as well as you'd expect. Rebecca blames Jason for their financial troubles. Jason blames her spending habits. They're in marriage counseling, though I'm not particularly optimistic. And the twins?" Her expression softened. "The twins are resilient, as children often are. They've been spending more time with us recently." She hesitated, then added, "They ask about you." The simple statement pierced my carefully constructed defenses. "What do you tell them?" "That their grandmother loves them very much, but she needed to move to a new home by the water." Carolyn studied me carefully. "Was I wrong?" "No," I said quietly. "That's true." Carolyn reached into her handbag and withdrew an envelope. "Sophia made this for you. Lucas contributed the dinosaur stickers." Inside was a crayon drawing of a stick figure with gray hair standing beside what appeared to be water, with a lopsided sun overhead. Multicolored dinosaur stickers paraded across the bottom of the page. "We miss you, Grandma," was printed in wobbly letters. I traced the childish handwriting, my throat tight with emotion. "Thank you for bringing this." Carolyn nodded. "They're innocent in all this, Eleanor. Whatever Rebecca and Jason have done, the children shouldn't lose their grandmother." "I never intended for them to," I admitted. "I just needed space to process everything." "And have you processed it?" I considered the question seriously. "Not entirely. I'm not sure I ever will fully understand how my own daughter could do what she did." "Speaking as a mother who's made her share of mistakes," Carolyn said carefully, "sometimes our greatest failures come from believing we're doing the right thing." She stirred her coffee thoughtfully. Rebecca convinced herself. She was simply redistributing family resources, taking what would eventually be hers anyway. That doesn't justify it. "No," Carolyn agreed. "It doesn't, but understanding the rationalization might help with the processing." We sat in silence for a moment, two grandmothers linked by circumstances neither of us could have anticipated. "Would you be open to seeing the twins?" Carolyn finally asked. "Harold and I could bring them for a visit. No Rebecca or Jason involved." The offer was tempting, a chance to maintain my relationship with my grandchildren without facing the daughter who had betrayed me. Yet something about it felt wrong, like building a family connection on a foundation of secrets and omissions. "I appreciate the offer," I said carefully, "but I think that would be confusing for the children. They shouldn't have to navigate adult conflicts or keep secrets from their parents." Carolyn raised an eyebrow. "Are you saying you're ready to see Rebecca again?" "I'm saying I need to find a way forward that doesn't require pretending the past didn't happen. but also doesn't deny the twins a relationship with both their grandmother and their parents, I clarified. I just don't know what that looks like yet. Carolyn nodded, seemingly satisfied with my answer. When you figure it out, let me know. In the meantime, Harold and I will make sure they don't forget you. After she left, I sat on my small balcony, watching sailboats tack against the wind on the bay. The children's drawing lay on my lap, bright and innocent against the muted tones of my new life. I couldn't bring myself to cut Rebecca and Jason out of my life completely, not if it meant losing Sophia and Lucas as well. But neither could I simply forgive and forget, pretending that trust hadn't been irreparably damaged. There had to be a middle path, some way to move forward with clear eyes and firm boundaries. I just needed to find it. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. 2 days later, my phone rang with Rebecca's number. I nearly declined the call out of habit, but found myself answering instead. Mom? Her voice sounded different, less entitled, more hesitant. Is this a bad time? I have a few minutes, I replied neutrally. What is it, Rebecca? She took a deep breath. We're selling the house, the big one with the media room and the 3-car garage. We've found a smaller place that's more realistic. Carolyn mentioned that might happen. Of course she did, Rebecca muttered, then caught herself. Sorry. It's just strange having my mother-in-law so involved in our financial decisions. Perhaps if you hadn't stolen from your actual mother, you wouldn't need your mother-in-law's intervention. I observed mildly. There was a pause, then, I deserved that. Another breath. Mom, I know you don't want to hear apologies, but I am sorry. Truly sorry. Not just for getting caught, but for what we did. For betraying your trust. For treating you like a resource instead of a person. It was the first acknowledgement that approached genuine remorse. Not perfect, not complete, but a starting point. Thank you for saying that, I said carefully. It doesn't change what happened, but I appreciate the recognition. The twins miss you, she continued. They keep asking when they can see Grandma. Eleanor again. I miss them too, I admitted. Silence stretched between us, decades of love and hurt suspended in the balance. Would you consider, Rebecca began, then faltered. Would it be possible for us to bring them to visit you? Just a short visit, completely on your terms. I considered the request. Was I ready to face Rebecca and Jason in person? To set aside the anger that still flared whenever I thought of what they'd done? Perhaps not entirely, but I was ready to begin finding that middle path. Yes, I said finally, but with conditions. We meet in a neutral location, not my apartment and not your home. A park or restaurant, somewhere public. Of course, Rebecca agreed quickly. Whatever you're comfortable with. And I want to be clear about something, I continued. This is for the twins. I'm not ready to resume a normal mother-daughter relationship with you, Rebecca. That might never be possible again. Her sharp intake of breath told me the words had hit their mark. I understand, she said quietly. But I hope someday that might change. That depends entirely on your actions going forward, I replied. Not your words or promises. We arranged to meet the following Saturday at a waterfront, park near Sandpiper Shores. After hanging up, I felt a complex mixture of emotions, apprehension, residual anger, but also a cautious sense of possibility. Not for restoration of what was lost, but for the creation of something new, something with clearer boundaries and more honest expectations. On Saturday morning, I arrived at the park early, choosing a picnic table with a good view of both the playground and the small marina beyond. The day was perfect. Clear blue skies, gentle breeze, the kind of autumn warmth that feels like summer's parting gift. I spotted them before they saw me. Rebecca pushing Lucas on the swing, Jason lifting Sophia onto a climbing structure. The twins had grown even in the short months since I'd last seen them. Lucas's dark curls now fell across his forehead in a way that painfully recalled Richard. Sophia's determined expression as she tackled the climbing wall was pure Rebecca, at that age. When Sophia noticed me, her delighted scream caught everyone's attention. "Grandma Eleanor!" She scrambled down from the climbing structure and raced toward me, Lucas quickly abandoning his swing to follow. They collided with me in a tangle of small arms and breathless excitement, nearly knocking me off the bench. "We missed you so much," Sophia declared. "Did you get our pictures? Grandma Winter said she would give them to you." "I did, sweetheart. They're hanging on my refrigerator." Lucas tugged at my sleeve. "Do you live in a castle by the ocean now?" Mommy said. "You have a new house near the water." "Not quite a castle," I laughed. "But yes, I live near the water now. I can watch the sailboats from my window." Rebecca and Jason approached more slowly, uncertainty visible in their posture. Jason carried a picnic basket, his knuckles white, around the handle. Rebecca's smile was tentative, her eyes scanning my face for clues about how to proceed. "Hello, Mom," she said softly. "You look well." "Thank you. The sea air agrees with me." I gestured to the picnic table. "Shall we sit?" The next 2 hours unfolded with awkward courtesy overlaying deeper tensions. Jason and Rebecca were scrupulously polite, careful to avoid any topic that might cause friction. I responded in kind, focusing my attention primarily on the twins, who were blissfully unaware of the emotional undercurrents swirling around the adults. We ate the lunch they'd brought, gourmet sandwiches that suggested they were still trying to maintain appearances despite their financial setbacks. The twins chattered about school, friends, the new puppy Grandma and Grandpa Winters had promised them when we moved to our new house. As they finished eating, Jason suggested taking the twins to feed the ducks at the nearby pond. "Give you two some time to talk," he said, studiously avoiding my gaze. The twins eagerly agreed, and soon Rebecca and I were alone at the picnic table. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Rebecca traced patterns on the wooden table with her fingertip, her wedding ring catching the sunlight. I noticed it was different, smaller, simpler than the ostentatious diamond she'd worn before. "We had to sell my original engagement ring," she said, following my gaze. "Part of the adjustments we're making." "I see." She looked up, her eyes meeting mine directly for the first time. "No, I don't think you do see, Mom. Everything's different now. We're different." 3 months is a very short time for meaningful change, Rebecca. "I know that," she acknowledged, "but it's a start. Jason's left the financial advisory business. He's working for his father now, learning the family business from the ground up. No client funds to manage, no temptation. And you? I've gone back to work full-time. Marketing coordinator for a local nonprofit. The pay is less than my old corporate position, but the hours are more family-friendly." She hesitated. "We've also both started therapy, separately and together." I raised an eyebrow. "Voluntary therapy?" A wry smile crossed her face. "Not entirely. It's one of Harold and Carolyn's conditions for the loan, but it's been illuminating." "In what way?" Rebecca looked out toward the playground, where Jason was helping the twins toss bread to a gathering of ducks. "I've been confronting some uncomfortable truths about myself, about the entitlement I've carried, the expectations I've had." She turned back to me. "About how I've treated you." I waited, not offering absolution, not yet. "My therapist asked me a question that I can't stop thinking about," she continued. "She asked when I stopped seeing you as a person with your own needs and dreams and started seeing you only in relation to what you could do for me." Rebecca's voice caught. "The terrible thing is, I couldn't answer. I couldn't pinpoint when it happened because I'm not sure I ever saw you any other way." The admission struck me with its raw honesty. "At least you recognize it now," I said quietly. Rebecca nodded. I do. And I'm trying to change, not just for you or the twins, but for myself. I don't want to be the person who could do what I did. From anyone else, these words might have sounded like practiced therapy speak, designed to elicit sympathy without true accountability. But I knew my daughter. For all her flaws, direct dishonesty had never been among them. Her betrayal had been one of entitlement and rationalization, not calculated deception. What do you want from me, Rebecca? I asked finally. Beyond these occasional visits with the twins? She considered the question seriously. I want a chance to earn back your trust. Not all at once, not without conditions or boundaries, just a chance to show you that I can change, that we can have a different kind of relationship. She twisted her new, simpler wedding band. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want the opportunity to try to deserve it someday. It was perhaps the most mature thing I'd ever heard my daughter say, an acknowledgement of consequences without demands for immediate reconciliation. It didn't erase the hurt or rebuild the trust, but it cracked open a door I'd thought permanently sealed. I can't promise anything, I said carefully. But I'm willing to take small steps. These visits with the twins can continue. Maybe once. A month for now. Relief flooded her face. Thank you. That means everything. And Rebecca? I added, my voice firmer. If there's ever another breach of trust, any deception, any manipulation, that will be the end. Permanently. Do you understand? She nodded solemnly. I understand. Completely. Jason returned with the twins, who were eager to show me the duck friends they'd made. The remainder of our visit passed more easily, the initial tension partially diffused by the honest conversation. When it was time to leave, the twins hugged me tightly, extracting promises that they could visit my ocean house soon. Maybe next time, I agreed, looking to Rebecca for confirmation. She nodded, understanding the gradual nature of the trust we were attempting to rebuild. As they walked toward their car, a modest sedan that had replaced the luxury SUV they'd once driven, Rebecca turned back. Mom? Thank you for giving us this chance. We won't waste it. I watched them drive away, feeling neither the sharp pain of betrayal nor the comfortable warmth of reconciliation, but something in between, a cautious hope that from the ashes of what had been destroyed, something healthier might eventually grow. Part 5. A life-reclaimed winter settled over the bay, bringing shorter days and long contemplative evenings. I developed a routine that centered me, morning walks along the shore regardless of weather, afternoons dedicated to Michael's healthcare technology projects, evenings filled with new friendships and activities at Sandpiper Shores. I joined a book club, took up watercolor painting, and even began dating, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. Charles, a retired English professor with kind eyes and a wicked sense of humor, became a regular dinner companion. We shared a love of classic films and spirited debates about literature. His wife of 40 years had passed from the same aggressive cancer that had taken Richard, creating a bond of shared understanding between us. Grief changes shape, but it never truly leaves, he told me one evening as we walked along the lamplit shoreline path. It becomes part of the landscape of your heart. Like the house I lost, I mused. No longer mine, but still somehow part of me. He nodded, understanding without needing further explanation. That was the gift of finding connection later in life, the shared vocabulary of experience, the comfortable acknowledgement of complexity. My monthly visits with the twins expanded, to include occasional dinners at family-friendly restaurants, weekend outings to museums or parks. Rebecca and Jason maintained a respectful distance during these times, never pushing for more intimacy than I was prepared to offer, never making demands or assumptions. Their financial situation stabilized with their downsized lifestyle and reduced expectations. They repaid half of Carolyn and Harold's loan ahead of schedule. Small gestures began to accumulate. Birthday cards with handwritten notes rather than generic signatures, thoughtful questions about my work with Michael's company, genuine interest in my new activities and friendships. None of these erased what had happened, but they created a foundation for something different, something potentially healthier. Christmas approached, bringing with it the weight of traditions and expectations. In previous years, the holiday had always been celebrated at my house. The formal dining room set with Richard's grandmother's china, the living room dominated by a perfectly decorated tree, stockings hung from the mantel for each family member. This year would necessarily be different. My apartment at Sandpiper Shores, though comfortable, couldn't accommodate elaborate celebrations. More significantly, the emotional landscape had shifted too dramatically for simple continuity of traditions. A week before Christmas, Carolyn called me. "Harold and I are hosting Christmas dinner this year," she announced without preamble. "We'd like you to join us." The invitation surprised me. "That's very kind, but are you sure? Won't it be awkward?" "Undoubtedly," she replied dryly. "But the twins should have all their grandparents together for Christmas. And frankly, Eleanor, I've grown rather fond of you over these past months. You've handled an impossible situation with remarkable grace." I smiled at her characteristic blend of practicality and unexpected warmth. "In that case, I'd be honored. What can I bring?" "Just yourself. And perhaps that professor friend Charles that Rebecca mentioned you've been seeing. The more the merrier, as they say." Charles agreed to accompany me, equally amused and intrigued by the complex family dynamics he'd be witnessing. "It's like a holiday production of a modern Greek tragedy," he joked, "with slightly less bloodshed, one hopes." On Christmas Day, we arrived at the Winters' impressive colonial home bearing token gifts, books for the twins, wine for our hosts. Harold greeted us warmly, Carolyn with her characteristic blend of formality and genuine welcome. The twins launched themselves at me with their usual enthusiasm, eager to show me the gifts Santa had brought. Rebecca and Jason appeared from the kitchen, their initial awkwardness giving way to genuine if careful warmth. Rebecca had cut her hair, the shorter style making her look both younger and somehow more mature. Jason seemed humbler, the slick confidence of the financial advisor replaced by a quieter demeanor. "Merry Christmas, Mom," Rebecca said, briefly embracing me. "I'm so glad you could come." Dinner was a masterpiece of Carolyn's organizational skills. The table set with elegant simplicity, the conversation guided away from potential landmines. Charles proved an unexpected asset, his academic background providing neutral topics and his gentle humor diffusing moments of tension. After dinner, as the twins played with their new toys and the adults settled in the living room with coffee, Harold raised his glass. "To family," he said simply, in all its complicated glory. We drank to that, each of us understanding the layers of meaning behind his toast. Later, as Charles and I prepared to leave, Rebecca approached me privately. "Mom, I wanted to give you this," she said, handing me a small wrapped package. "Not with everyone watching." Inside was a delicate silver locket on a chain. When opened, it revealed a photograph of Richard on one side and the twins on the other. "It's beautiful," I said, genuinely touched. "There's something else," Rebecca added, handing me an envelope. "This is the first installment." I opened the envelope to find a check for $5,000 made out to me. "What is this?" "Jason and I have been setting aside money each month," she explained. "We know we can never fully repay what we took, not just the money, but the trust. But we want to try, at least with the financial part." "Rebecca, you don't need to." "Yes, I do," she interrupted gently. "Not because you need it now, but because I need to do it. For myself, for my own integrity." She looked at me steadily. "It might take years, but I will repay every cent. It's not about buying forgiveness. It's about taking responsibility. I studied my daughter's face, seeing in it a maturity that had been absent before. The entitlement that had once colored her expressions had given way to something more grounded, more authentic. "I'll accept this," I said finally, "but not for myself." I reached into my purse and withdrew a folder. "I've been working on something I'd like to show you." Inside was information about a scholarship fund I'd established with part of the proceeds from selling my house. "The Richard Sullivan Memorial Scholarship," I explained, "for nursing students who are single parents or caretakers, people who are trying to build careers while supporting others." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears as she read the details. "Dad would have loved this." "I think so too." I placed the check back in her hand. "Your repayments can go directly into the scholarship fund. That feels right to me." She nodded, understanding the symbolism of the gesture, transformation of debt into opportunity, of betrayal into legacy. As Charles and I drove back to Sandpiper Shores that night, the Christmas lights of passing homes reflecting in the car windows, he asked, "How do you feel about today?" I considered the question carefully. Grateful, I decided. Not because everything's fixed, it isn't, and some things never will be. But grateful that something meaningful could grow from such painful soil. He reached over to squeeze my hand. That's the best kind of gratitude, the clear-eyed kind that doesn't require perfection. Back in my apartment, I placed the silver locket on my bedside table and stood for a moment at the window, looking out at the dark bay where a few boats still displayed their holiday lights. The reflection in the glass showed a woman I was still getting to know, no longer defined primarily as mother or widow or caretaker, but as herself. A woman who had learned, painfully but definitively, that setting boundaries wasn't selfish but essential. The path forward wouldn't be simple. Trust, once fractured, never mends without visible seams. My relationship with Rebecca would always bear the scars of her betrayal, always require more vigilance and clearer boundaries than most mother-daughter connections. But as I turned from the window and surveyed my new home, smaller than the house I'd lost but truly mine in a way that other space had never been, I felt a profound sense of peace. The retirement I was building wasn't the one I'd planned, but it was rich with possibility, independence, and hard-won wisdom. When my daughter used my retirement savings, she thought she was taking my future. Instead, she inadvertently forced me to create a new one centered on my own needs and dreams rather than others' expectations. The house she thought she'd inherit had been replaced by something far more valuable. A mother who finally understood that taking care of herself wasn't selfish but necessary, who had learned that love without boundaries isn't love at all, but exploitation. That night, I slept deeply and dreamlessly, untroubled by regret or uncertainty. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges and joys, its own opportunities for growth and connection. But for now, this moment, I was exactly where I needed to be. No longer sacrificing my present for others' futures, but fully inhabiting my own life at last. Spring arrived at Sandpiper Shores with a riot of color. Azaleas blooming along the walking paths, sailboats returning to the bay in greater numbers, residents emerging from winter hibernation to enjoy the lengthening days. My first year of reinvention was coming full circle. The Richard Sullivan Memorial Scholarship had selected its first recipient, Maria Delgado, a 32-year-old single mother of two who was pursuing her nursing degree while working nights at a local hospital. When I met her at the small award ceremony, her determined eyes and capable hands reminded me of myself 3 decades earlier. "This scholarship means I can reduce my hours at the hospital," she told me, her voice thick with emotion. "I can actually see my kids awake sometimes." I squeezed her hand. "Richard would have been proud to support you. He always believed in giving people the chance to build something better." As Maria and her children chatted with the other attendees, Carolyn Winters appeared at my elbow, elegant as always in a tailored spring suit. "That was nicely done," she commented, nodding toward Maria. "Practical help that preserves dignity." "Thank you," I replied. Rebecca's latest contribution covered the second semester of Maria's tuition. Carolyn's perfectly arched eyebrows rose slightly. "She's continuing with the repayments then?" "Every month without fail. $5,000, the first Friday of each month." A small, satisfied smile played at Carolyn's lips. "Good. Consistency builds character." She glanced around the university reception room. "Speaking of Rebecca, have you told her your news yet?" I shook my head. "Not yet. I wanted to wait until everything was finalized." "Well, it's your decision to share when you're ready," Carolyn said. "But in my experience, families function better with fewer surprises." Her advice, though unsolicited, wasn't wrong. The fragile reconstruction of my relationship with Rebecca depended largely on clear communication and appropriate boundaries. The news I'd been keeping to myself would certainly alter those boundaries again. Later that week, during our monthly family dinner at a waterfront restaurant, I watched the twins devour chocolate sundaes while Rebecca and Jason discussed their summer plans. "We thought about renting a beach cottage for a week in July," Rebecca said. "Something simple on the North Shore. The twins are finally old enough to really enjoy building sandcastles and swimming." "That sounds lovely," I replied. "Charles and I might be away in July as well." Rebecca looked up with interest. "Oh? Where are you two going?" I set down my coffee cup carefully. "Actually, that's something I wanted to discuss with you. Charles has asked me to marry him." Silence fell over the table. The twins, oblivious to the significance of my announcement, continued demolishing their ice cream. Rebecca's spoon hovered halfway to her mouth, her expression shifting rapidly between surprise, confusion, and something harder to define. "Marry him?" she repeated. "But you've only been dating for, what, 6 months?" "7, I corrected gently. "And at my age, lengthy courtships seem rather unnecessary. We know what we want." Jason recovered first, offering a smile that seemed genuinely warm. "Congratulations, Eleanor. Charles is a good man." Rebecca set down her spoon. "Mom, this is sudden. Are you sure? I mean, what do you really know about him? About his finances? His health?" I caught the flicker of discomfort that crossed Jason's face at the mention of finances. "I know enough," I said simply. "We've both been transparent about our situations. Charles has a solid pension from the university, reasonable investments, and adult children who are self-sufficient. I have my own resources. We'll maintain separate finances but share living expenses." "Where will you live?" Rebecca pressed. "Your apartment is too small for 2 people. Will you move in with him? Or are you planning to buy another house together?" The subtle emphasis on another house wasn't lost on me. "We're still working out those details," I replied. "But most likely we'll look for a larger apartment within Sandpiper Shores. It's a community we both enjoy." Rebecca pushed her dessert away, suddenly no longer interested in it. "This just seems so fast. Dad's only been gone for, 12 years? And now you're replacing him with someone you barely know?" The unfairness of her comment stung. 12 years is hardly rushing into a new relationship, Rebecca. And Charles isn't replacing your father. No one could. He's simply a man I've grown to care for deeply, who brings joy and companionship to my life now. "And what happens if it doesn't work out?" she continued, her voice rising slightly. "What if you get married and then discover he's not who you thought he was? You could lose everything all over again." Jason placed a hand on her arm. "Beck, maybe this isn't the best place to have this conversation. The kids." But Rebecca shook off his touch. "I'm just concerned, that's all. Mom's vulnerable. She's still recovering from everything that happened. Making major life decisions in that state isn't always wise. I felt a flare of indignation at her characterization. Vulnerable? Rebecca, I'm 64 years old, not 16. I've managed to rebuild my life quite successfully after everything that happened, as you put it. That's not what I meant, she backtracked. It's just, marriage is a huge step. Have you considered alternatives like just living together? Testing the waters before making it legal? Lucas looked up from his ice cream, suddenly interested in the adult conversation. Are you getting married, Grandma? Will you wear a princess dress? The innocent question diffused some of the tension. I smiled at my grandson. Yes, sweetheart, I am getting married. But I think I'm a little old for a princess dress. Maybe something simpler. Sophia joined in. Can we be flower girls? Please. Please, please. Of course you can, I assured her, then turned back to Rebecca. I appreciate your concern, misplaced though it is, but this isn't a decision I've made lightly. Charles and I have discussed everything from healthcare directives to funeral preferences. We're going into this with open eyes. Rebecca's expression remained troubled. I just don't want to see you hurt again. You deserve happiness, Mom. You've been through enough. There was genuine care behind her words, but also something else. A subtle resistance to change, perhaps, or a lingering sense of entitlement about how my life should proceed. Thank you for your concern, I said gently but firmly. But my happiness is my responsibility, just as yours is your responsibility. I've decided to marry Charles because he brings joy, companionship, and intellectual stimulation to my life. That's reason enough. After dinner, as Jason took the twins to the car, Rebecca lingered behind. Mom, I'm sorry if I overreacted. It was just unexpected. I know, I acknowledged. Change can be difficult to process, especially when it involves people we care about. She twisted her hands together, a nervous habit from childhood. It's not that I don't want you to be happy. I do. It's just, everything's been changing so fast. The house, your move, our situation, and now this. Sometimes it feels like I'm losing all my reference points. The vulnerability in her admission touched me. I understand that. But change is inevitable. Rebecca, fighting it only makes the transition more painful. I know, she sighed, and I am trying. It's just hard sometimes to accept that the future isn't going to look like what I expected. That's something we both have had to learn, I observed. But different doesn't necessarily mean worse. She nodded, then impulsively hugged me. A real embrace, not the careful, measured contact we'd maintained since the reconciliation began. Congratulations, Mom. I really do want you to be happy. Thank you, sweetheart, I replied, returning the hug briefly before stepping back. That means a lot to me. As I watched them drive away, Charles appeared beside me, having discreetly given us space for our conversation. How did it go? He asked. About as well as could be expected, I replied. Initial shock, some resistance, then grudging acceptance. The typical stages of parental reinvention as witnessed by adult children. He laughed, slipping his arm around my waist. Yes. I remember my daughter's face when I mentioned buying a motorcycle at 67. You'd have thought I'd announced plans to take up cliff diving without equipment. Did you get the motorcycle? I did. Sold it 2 years later when my arthritis made it uncomfortable. But those were 2 glorious years of inappropriately youthful adventure. I smiled, grateful, for his understanding of the complex parent-child dynamics at play. Rebecca will adjust. She just needs time. And in the meantime, he said, we have a wedding to plan. Something simple, I hope. The simplest, I agreed. Just close family and friends, here at Sandpiper Shores. No fuss, no elaborate preparations. Just us, making our commitment official. We walked back to my apartment, discussing potential dates and minor details. The evening air was sweet with jasmine, the bay glittering with reflected lights from boats and shoreline buildings. I felt a profound sense of rightness, of life unfolding according to its own organic wisdom rather than external expectations. 2 weeks later, I received an unexpected delivery at my apartment. A large flat package wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. The return address simply read, Sullivan Family Archives, with no further details. I opened it carefully to find a leather-bound photo album I hadn't seen in years. It had been stored in the attic of my old house, tucked away with holiday decorations and outgrown children's clothes. Forgotten treasures I hadn't had space to bring to Sandpiper Shores. Inside the front cover was a note in Rebecca's handwriting. Mom, when we were clearing out some storage items for the move, I found this in a box marked Wedding. I thought you might want it before your big day. Looking at these photos reminded me how much Dad adored you and how happy you made each other. I hope you and Charles find that same happiness. Love, Rebecca. The album contained photographs from my wedding to Richard, not the formal portraits that had been displayed in our home, but candid snapshots capturing unguarded moments of joy. Richard throwing his head back in laughter during the best man's toast. Me sneaking a kiss when we thought no one was watching. Our hands clasped tightly as we cut the cake, his thumb brushing tenderly over my knuckles. I traced the images with my fingertip, memories flooding back with vivid clarity. The happiness captured in those photographs had been real. The love, genuine and enduring despite its eventual loss to cancer. Richard had been my first great love, the father of my child, my partner through the challenges of early adulthood. Charles would never replace him, nor would I want him to. What Charles offered was different but equally precious. Companionship for this new chapter, intellectual connection, the comfort of shared experiences and parallel histories. Not a replacement, but a continuation of life's journey with a new, traveling companion. Rebecca's gesture in sending the album touched me deeply. It represented not just acceptance of my upcoming marriage, but acknowledgement of the complex emotional landscape we all inhabited, where past and present, loss and new beginnings could coexist without diminishing each other. I called her that evening. Thank you for the album, I said when she answered. It means more than you know. I'm glad, she replied softly. I wasn't sure if it would be painful to look at right now, with your wedding coming up. Not painful, I assured her. Bittersweet, perhaps, but in the best possible way. They're beautiful memories that deserve to be remembered. There was one photo in particular, Rebecca said hesitantly. Near the back, Dad looking at you while you were dancing. His expression. I never realized until now what that look meant. How much he adored you. I turned to the page she described. There was Richard, impossibly young and handsome in his rented tuxedo, watching me twirl in my simple white dress, his eyes filled with a love so palpable it seemed to radiate from the faded photograph. He did love me, I agreed. And I loved him. That never goes away, even when the person does. Does Charles understand that? She asked, the question sincere rather than challenging. He does. His wife, Margaret, was the love of his life for 40 years. He wears her memory like a treasured keepsake, not displayed prominently for everyone to see, but carried close, informing who he is. I paused. That's one of the things that drew us together, actually. We both understand what it means to love deeply and lose profoundly. Rebecca was quiet for a moment. I think I'd like to know him better, she said finally. Charles, I mean. If he's going to be my stepfather, even at this late stage, I should make more of an effort. I'd like that, I said, surprised and pleased by the overture. Perhaps you and Jason could join us for dinner next week? Just adults, so we can talk properly. I'd like that too, she agreed. And Mom, I really am happy for you. I want you to know that. After we hung up, I sat with the photo album open in my lap, this tangible connection between past and present, loss and renewal. Rebecca's gesture had been more than a wedding gift. It was a step toward a more mature relationship, one that acknowledged my autonomy while honoring our shared history. The dinner the following week proved surprisingly enjoyable. Charles, with his academic's curiosity and genuine interest in people, asked thoughtful questions about Rebecca and Jason's lives, careers, and interests. He shared stories about his own adult children, the challenges and joys of watching them forge their paths in the world. Parenting never really ends, he observed over dessert. It just changes form as they grow. My son still calls me for advice. About his garden, of all things. As if I know anything about horticulture beyond not letting plants die of thirst. Rebecca laughed. I can't imagine the twins as adults. They seem so permanently 7 years old in my mind. It happens before you know it, I told her. One day they're building sandcastles. The next, they're building careers and families of their own. Speaking of building, Jason said, we've been considering some changes now that we're more financially stable. He glanced at me, clearly conscious of the delicate territory. Rebecca's been talking about starting a small business. Rebecca shot him a look that suggested this wasn't a topic they'd planned to discuss. It's just an idea at this stage, nothing definite. What kind of business? Charles asked with genuine interest. She hesitated, then, event planning, actually. Small-scale, specialized events like milestone anniversaries, retirement celebrations, intimate weddings. She glanced at me. Things that deserve thoughtful attention to detail. You'd be excellent at that, I said, surprised but impressed by the concept. You've always had an eye for creating meaningful experiences. It would start small, she explained, warming to the topic now that it had been broached. Working from home, building a client base gradually, low overhead, minimal financial risk. The emphasis on fiscal responsibility wasn't lost on me. It sounds well considered. Have you started developing a business plan? Just preliminary research so far, market analysis, potential competition, that sort of thing. She twisted her napkin slightly. Actually, I was wondering if I could talk to you about it sometime. Get your perspective as someone who managed household finances so successfully for so many years. The irony of her seeking financial advice, from me considering our history, hung in the air between us. But there was no mockery in her request, only genuine respect, and perhaps a desire to connect through a shared practical concern. I'd be happy to offer whatever insights I can, I said carefully, though my experience was with personal rather than business finances. Still, you kept us afloat through some incredibly lean times, she acknowledged. That kind of resourcefulness is exactly what a new business needs. Charles, sensing the significance of the exchange, smoothly steered the conversation toward lighter topics. By the end of the evening, a tentative warmth had developed between him and Rebecca, not immediate acceptance or intimacy, but the beginning of mutual respect that might, with time, grow into genuine affection. As Jason helped Rebecca with her coat, Charles said quietly, I want you to know that I understand the unique place your father holds in your heart and your mother's. I'm not here to replace him or erase his memory. I'm simply grateful for the chance to be part of your family's continuing story. Rebecca studied him for a moment, then nodded. Thank you for saying that. It means a lot to hear it directly. In the car on the way back to Sandpiper Shores, Charles squeezed my hand. She's trying, Eleanor. That's significant progress. Yes, I agreed, feeling cautiously optimistic. She is. Our wedding took place on a perfect June morning at Sandpiper Shores, the garden pavilion decorated simply with white roses and ivy. True to my word to Lucas, I wore something far from a princess dress, a tailored teal silk suit that brought out the color of my eyes and complemented my silver hair. The guest list was small: Rebecca, Jason, and the twins, Charles's son and daughter with their spouses, a handful of close friends from both our lives, and, somewhat to my surprise, Harold and Carolyn Winters, who had become unexpected allies in my reinvention. Sophia and Lucas performed their flower girl and ring bearer duties with solemn concentration, though Lucas couldn't resist a theatrical bow after successfully delivering the rings, earning laughter from the assembled guests. The ceremony was brief but meaningful, our vows straightforward promises of companionship, respect, and care. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, Charles kissed me with gentle affection, his hands warm and steady against mine. During the reception, as we shared cake and champagne beneath flowering trellises, Rebecca approached me alone, having left Jason supervising the twins' second helpings of wedding cake. "You look beautiful, Mom," she said sincerely. "I don't think I've ever seen you look so radiant." "Thank you, sweetheart. Being happy agrees with me, it seems." She nodded, sipping her champagne thoughtfully. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said that day at the restaurant, about your happiness being your responsibility and mine being mine." "Oh? It's true, isn't it? We can support each other, love each other, but ultimately, we each have to build our own lives." She gazed across the garden to where Jason was pretending to be a monster chasing the giggling twins. "I spent so long expecting other people to create my happiness. You, Jason, even the status that came with Jason's career. I never really took responsibility for it myself." The insight surprised me with its clarity and self-awareness. That's a powerful realization. "It didn't come easily," she admitted with a rueful smile. "Lots of therapy sessions and uncomfortable self-examination. But I'm getting there." She hesitated, then added, "I want you to know that I understand now why you had to draw such firm boundaries after what happened. It wasn't just about the money. It was about respecting your right to direct your own life." "Yes," I agreed, touched by her understanding. "Exactly that." Rebecca glanced at her watch. "Our gift should be arriving any minute. I hope you don't mind that it's coming during the reception." Before I could question this unusual timing, a staff member from Sandpiper Shores approached. "Mrs. Mrs. Whitaker? There's a delivery for you at the front entrance." Charles joined us, curious about the interruption. "A delivery? During our wedding reception?" "Apparently so," I replied, equally mystified. "Rebecca says it's our gift from her and Jason." Together, we followed the staff member to the entrance of Sandpiper Shores, where a delivery van was parked. The driver opened the back doors to reveal a baby grand piano, gleaming black in the sunlight. I turned to Rebecca in astonishment. "A piano? But where?" "We spoke with the management here," she explained. "There's space in the common room for it. They've agreed to let you bring in a piano teacher once a week for anyone who wants lessons." She hesitated. "You always loved playing, but you gave it up to work extra shifts when I was young. I thought maybe now you could rediscover that joy and share it with others here." I was momentarily speechless, deeply moved by the thoughtfulness of the gift. It represented more than just an instrument. It was an acknowledgement of dreams deferred, an invitation to reclaim parts of myself set aside during years of caretaking. "It's perfect," I managed finally, squeezing her hand. "Absolutely perfect." Charles watched the piano being carefully unloaded, his expression pleased. "You never mentioned you played," he said. "I'm looking forward to discovering this hidden talent of yours." "Hidden is right," I laughed. "It's been decades. I'll be terribly rusty." "All the more reason to start practicing again," he replied. "We have time now, time for rediscovery." As the piano was wheeled into the lobby, residents began to gather, curious about the commotion. When they realized what was happening, a spontaneous cheer went up. "Will you play something for us, Eleanor?" called Martha, a retired music teacher who had become a close friend. "Just a little piece to christen it?" Put on the spot, I hesitated, but Charles gently guided me to the bench. "Just one song," he encouraged. "For our wedding day." I placed my fingers on the keys, surprised by how familiar they felt despite the long absence. Slowly, hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence, I began to play Debussy's Clair de Lune, a piece that had been Richard's favorite, and one that now seemed perfectly suited to this moment of gentle beauty and new beginnings. As the music filled the space, I caught Rebecca's eye. She was watching me with an expression I hadn't seen in years, a mixture of pride, love, and genuine happiness for my happiness. It wasn't the complete healing of all wounds. Those scars would always remain. But it was a bridge across the chasm that had separated us. A shared recognition that despite everything, we had found our way back to something real and valuable. Later, as Charles and I prepared to leave for our brief honeymoon at a coastal bed and breakfast, Rebecca hugged me tightly. "Be happy, Mom," she whispered. "You've earned this." "So have you," I replied, realizing I meant it. Despite her mistakes, despite the pain she had caused, she too deserved the chance to build a better life, one based on genuine values rather than appearances, on creating happiness rather than acquiring its trappings. As our car pulled away, rice and flower petals scattering in our wake, I looked back at the assembled well-wishers. Rebecca stood with Jason's arm around her waist, the twins waving enthusiastically beside them. Carolyn and Harold Winters stood nearby, their presence a reminder of how unexpected life's connections could be. Charles's grown children called out final congratulations, their acceptance of me a gift in itself. The circle of support wasn't perfect or without complications. The history we all shared contained too many difficult chapters for simple resolutions. But it was real, this imperfect community we had created, bound not by obligation or expectation, but by choice and effort, and the willingness to begin again. As we turned onto the main road leading away from Sandpiper Shores, Charles took my hand. "Happy?" I considered the question seriously, taking stock of the journey that had brought me here. From devoted mother to betrayed victim to woman reclaiming her life on her own terms. The path had been neither straight nor easy, marked by profound loss and unexpected discoveries, betrayal and renewal. "Yes," I said finally, squeezing his hand. "Not despite everything that's happened, but because of it. Every step of the way brought me here, to this moment, to this life that is finally, truly my own." 5 years passed with the gentle rhythm that marks time in later life. Charles and I settled into our shared apartment at Sandpiper Shores, eventually moving into a spacious 2-bedroom unit with a sunroom that became my painting studio and his reading nook. The scholarship fund flourished with Rebecca's monthly contributions and additional donations from unexpected sources. Carolyn and Harold Winters became regular contributors, hosting an annual fundraising dinner that attracted wealthy friends, eager to support healthcare education. What had begun as restitution evolved into something meaningful and sustaining. Rebecca's event planning business gained a reputation for thoughtful, personalized celebrations that honored significant life transitions. She specialized in retirement parties, anniversary renewals, and intimate weddings, bringing genuine empathy to these milestone moments. Jason found unexpected fulfillment working in his father's manufacturing business, his analytical skills serving him well in operations management rather than financial speculation. The twins, now 12, grew into distinct personalities. Sophia artistic and introspective like her grandfather Richard had been. Lucas mathematically inclined with Charles's dry wit. They visited regularly, dividing their time between our apartment and activities around Sandpiper Shores. My relationship with Rebecca stabilized into something neither of us could have predicted. Not the unquestioning closeness of before, nor the pained estrangement that followed her betrayal, but a measured connection built on clearer understanding of ourselves and each other. The boundaries remained firm but not rigid, allowing genuine warmth to flow within carefully defined channels. Then, in the autumn of my 70th year, Charles developed a persistent cough that wouldn't respond to standard treatments. The diagnosis came with brutal swiftness: advanced lung cancer, the same disease that had claimed Richard decades earlier. "Well, this is an unwelcome déjà vu," Charles remarked dryly after we left the oncologist's office, his gallows humor intact despite the grim prognosis. Though I suppose 77 is a more reasonable age for this sort of thing than 38 was. I squeezed his hand, unable to match his lightness in that moment. "We'll fight it," I said simply, "whatever it takes." The next morning, I called Rebecca. We had our regular monthly dinner scheduled for the following week, but this news couldn't wait. She arrived at our apartment within the hour, her face tight with concern. "How bad is it?" She asked once we were seated in the living room, Charles having tactfully excused himself to give us privacy. "Stage 3, possibly stage 4. We'll know more after additional tests." I kept my voice level with the same control I'd developed during Richard's illness, when showing my fear would only have magnified his. "There are treatment options, but the 5-year survival rate is not encouraging." Rebecca nodded, absorbing the information with the gravity it deserved. "What can I do to help?" "Just be here," I said simply. "For both of us. Charles values his relationship with you and the twins. That connection becomes even more important now." "Of course," she agreed immediately. "Whatever you need, whenever you need it. Jason and I can rearrange our schedules, take the kids to appointments, help with meals, anything." I smiled, despite everything. "You sound like me, 30 years ago." Her eyes softened in recognition. "I had a good teacher." In the weeks that followed, our lives reorganized around Charles's treatment schedule: chemotherapy sessions, consultations with specialists, an increasing array of medications to manage symptoms and side effects. The Sandpiper Shores community rallied around us with practical support: rides to appointments when I was too exhausted to drive, meals delivered on particularly difficult days, quiet companionship when words seemed inadequate. Rebecca kept her promise, appearing regularly with practical assistance that required no request or explanation. She seemed to intuitively understand what was needed, when to offer help and when to step back, when to engage Charles in conversation about his beloved English literature and when to simply sit quietly while he rested. One afternoon, as Charles napped after a particularly grueling treatment session, Rebecca and I sat on the balcony of our apartment, watching sailboats tack against the autumn wind. "You're good at this," I observed. The caretaking rhythm, knowing what's needed without being asked. She smiled faintly. "I had the best possible model." A pause, then. "I never really understood, what it cost you to care for Dad through his illness while raising me alone. Not until now, seeing what you're going through with Charles." "It's different this time," I said. "I'm not raising a child simultaneously. And I have support. You, Jason, the community here." "You should have had support then too," she replied, her voice tinged with regret. "Instead, you carried everything alone." I shrugged slightly. That was my choice. Perhaps not always a wise one, but mine nonetheless. Rebecca's gaze remained, fixed on the water. "Do you ever wonder how things might have been different? If you'd asked for help, taken more time for yourself, not sacrificed quite so completely?" The question hung between us, touching on themes we'd circled cautiously since our reconciliation: the patterns of our past, the dynamics that had led to her sense of entitlement and my depletion. "Sometimes," I admitted, "I wonder if my excessive giving created an expectation that became impossible to sustain." If I'd modeled better boundaries, perhaps you might have developed a different understanding of what you were entitled to. She nodded slowly. And perhaps if I'd seen you prioritize your own needs occasionally, I wouldn't have grown up believing your only value was in what you could provide for others. Her voice caught slightly. I've thought about this a lot in therapy, how I learned to see you as a resource rather than a person with her own dreams and needs. We both did the best we could with the understanding we had at the time, I said gently. You were a child. I was a young widow making decisions under tremendous pressure. Neither of us had perfect insight. Still, Rebecca persisted, I want you to know that I see it now. The complexity of the choices you made, the sacrifices that went unacknowledged. And I'm trying to teach my children differently. That love isn't measured by what you give up for others, but by how you help each other grow and thrive. The conversation marked a subtle but significant shift in our healing, an acknowledgement of shared responsibility for the patterns that had led to our estrangement, without diminishing the gravity of her actions or my right to protect myself from them. Charles's condition stabilized somewhat through the winter months. The chemotherapy couldn't cure the cancer but managed to slow its progression, giving us precious additional time. We used it well, focusing on quality rather than quantity. Quiet evenings reading aloud to each other, matinee concerts at the local chamber music society, weekend visits with the twins that centered on connection rather than activity. In February, during a routine appointment, Charles's oncologist suggested we consider hospice care. Not immediately, he clarified. But it's time to start thinking about the transition from treatment to comfort measures. The cancer is advancing, despite our best efforts. Charles nodded, unsurprised. How long? The doctor's expression was compassionate but direct. Perhaps 3 to 6 months. It could be less if the disease accelerates, or somewhat longer if you continue to respond well to palliative treatments. In the car afterward, Charles reached for my hand. I'd like to die at home, he said simply. In our apartment, with the view of the bay, not in a hospital. Of course, I agreed, my throat tight with unshed tears. Whatever you want. And I'd like to see the spring, he added with a small smile. One more season of renewal before I go. In May, as cherry blossoms floated like snow across the grounds of Sandpiper Shores, Charles's condition deteriorated rapidly. He became bedridden, then largely unresponsive, his breathing shallow and labored despite the morphine drip that kept him comfortable. The hospice nurse, a gentle woman named Diane who had guided many residents through this final transition, told me the end was near. Hours, perhaps a day or two at most, she said quietly. He's waiting for something, though. Many people do at the end. Rebecca arrived that afternoon, bringing fresh flowers for the bedside table. Peonies, Charles's favorite. She arranged them carefully in a crystal vase, then sat beside me at the bed, both of us watching the shallow rise and fall of his chest. He waited for you, I said after a while. That's good. She looked surprised. You think he was waiting for me? I nodded. He cares for you deeply, you know. Not just as my daughter, but as someone he came to value in her own right. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. I needed more time with him, to know him better. We always need more time, I replied softly. That's the universal human condition. Just after midnight, with Rebecca dozing in the chair beside the bed, Charles opened his eyes suddenly. His gaze, clear and focused for the first time in days, found mine with startling lucidity. Eleanor, he murmured, his voice barely audible. Remember what we talked about. Promise me. I knew instantly what he meant. Our many conversations about life after his death. His insistence that I continue embracing life fully rather than retreating into grief and isolation. I promise, I whispered, squeezing his hand gently. I'll remember. A faint smile touched his lips. His eyes drifted closed again, and minutes later his breathing changed, becoming slower, shallower, with longer pauses between each breath. Then, with a soft sigh like a final punctuation mark at the end of a well-crafted sentence, he was gone. Rebecca stirred, instantly alert to the change in the room. She looked at Charles, then at me, understanding dawning in her eyes. Without a word, she moved to sit beside me on the edge of the bed, her arm slipping around my shoulders as the tears I'd held back for so long finally broke free. Charles's memorial service was held in the community garden he had helped design, his favorite roses just coming into bloom around the central pavilion. His children delivered eloquent tributes that captured his intellectual passion and quiet humor. When it was my turn to speak, I stood beside the simple wooden podium, looking out at the gathered mourners. Charles and I found each other later in life, I began, my voice steadier than I had expected. After we had both loved and lost, raised our children, built our careers, and thought perhaps the chapter of romantic partnership had closed for us. His presence in my life these past 7 years was an unexpected gift, a second blooming that proved how love can take new forms at any age. I paused, gathering my thoughts. He taught English literature for 40 years, so he'd appreciate me quoting Tennyson here. "'Tis better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all." Like many aphorisms, this one contains both truth and oversimplification. The loss is real and painful, as anyone who has experienced it knows too well. But so is the enrichment that loving brings to our lives, the ways it expands our capacity for joy and meaning. That evening, after all the guests had departed, I returned to our apartment, now just my apartment, for the first time since Charles's death. Unlike with Richard's death, which had necessitated immediate practical actions to secure our financial survival, I now had the luxury of grief without urgency, time to sit with my loss, to determine gradually what to keep and what to release. I moved through the room slowly, touching familiar objects, allowing myself to feel the full weight of absence. When I reached the sunroom that had served as our shared creative space, I found a letter propped against his favorite lamp. "My dearest Eleanor," it began, "by the time you read this, I will have completed my journey, and you will be beginning a new phase of yours, one I regret I cannot share except in spirit." The letter continued for several pages, offering reflections on our life together, expressions of gratitude for the joy of our late-in-life partnership, and gentle encouragement for the path ahead. The final paragraph brought fresh tears. "Remember our conversation about third acts? How we agreed that life often presents 3 distinct movements: the establishment of identity in youth, the building of family and career in middle age, and, if we're fortunate, a final act of integration and meaning in our later years. Our marriage was part of both our third acts, a beautiful and unexpected development in stories we thought were already fully plotted. Now you face the possibility of an encore, time beyond what either of us anticipated. Use it well, my love. Create, connect, continue growing. Your story isn't finished yet." 3 years have passed since that night. I still live at Sandpiper Shores, though I've downsized to a 1-bedroom apartment with a larger studio space, where I teach watercolor classes twice weekly to fellow residents. The Richard Sullivan Memorial Scholarship now supports 4 nursing students annually, each one selected not just for academic promise, but for demonstrated compassion and commitment to patient care. Rebecca's business has expanded to include corporate retirement planning, helping executives transition to meaningful post-career pursuits. She consults me regularly on projects involving healthcare professionals, valuing my perspective as both a retired nurse and someone who navigated my own significant life transitions. The twins, now 15, visit monthly, staying in my guest room for weekend sleepovers that feature board games, baking experiments, and increasingly sophisticated conversations about their emerging interests and aspirations. Sophia talks of studying art therapy. Lucas remains committed to medicine but has developed a parallel passion for music, playing piano pieces that Charles once recommended. My relationship with Rebecca continues to evolve, strengthened by our shared experience of Charles's illness and death, by our ongoing conversations about patterns and choices, by the mutual respect that has replaced the damaged dynamics of our past. The monthly repayment checks still arrive like clockwork, now deposited directly into the scholarship fund without passing through my hands. A symbolic acknowledgement that what was taken can never truly be returned, but can be transformed into something that benefits others. Last month, during our regular dinner, Rebecca asked a question that caught me by surprise. "Are you happy, Mom?" Truly happy, I mean. I considered the question seriously, looking beyond the politeness that might have prompted an automatic affirmation. "Yes," I said finally. "Not in spite of everything that's happened, but because of it. Each experience, even the painful ones, has shaped me, taught me, brought me to this moment." She nodded, seemingly satisfied with my answer. "I think that's what I admire most about you now. Your resilience isn't just about surviving hardship. It's about finding meaning in it, creating something valuable from even the most difficult circumstances." Her insight touched me deeply, this evidence of her growth and self-awareness. That's a generous way to see it. "It's the truth," she replied simply. "When I used your retirement savings, I thought I was just taking money. I never realized I was stealing your future, your security, everything you'd worked for." She held my gaze steadily. "But instead of being destroyed by that betrayal, you built something better, a life with clearer boundaries, deeper relationships, and more authentic joy." "We both did," I acknowledged. "Neither of us would have chosen this path, but here we are nonetheless." Later that evening, after Rebecca had gone home, I sat on my balcony watching the moon's reflection ripple across the bay. At 73, I had lived through more transitions than I once thought possible, from young nurse to widow, from struggling single mother to comfortable retiree, from betrayed parent to reconciled mother, from grieving wife to independent elder. Each phase had brought its own challenges and gifts, its own lessons about love, boundaries, and resilience. The house I had once clung to so desperately, the retirement savings I had accumulated so carefully, these had been lost. Yet what remained was more valuable: self-knowledge, authentic relationships, a life aligned with my true values rather than external expectations. When my daughter used my retirement savings, she thought she was taking my future. Instead, she inadvertently forced me to create a new one, centered on my own needs and dreams rather than others' expectations. The house she thought she'd inherit had been replaced by something far more valuable. The understanding that taking care of myself wasn't selfish but necessary, that love without boundaries isn't love at all but exploitation, that true wealth lies not in possessions but in the capacity to begin again, however many times life requires it. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out!